Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for joining us today for our webinar, Learning to Speak Gift Planning, Learning to Speak Gift Planning. My name is Jen Lennon. I'm the Senior Marketing and Communications Coordinator at the Stelter Company. I'd like to welcome Jeremy Stelter to the webinar today. Jeremy is the Director of Business Development for the Western U.S., and I'm certain that many of you here today know him well from his frequent speaking engagements and conferences that he attends throughout the country. Jeremy, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Jen. Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us. We really appreciate your time. I'm really excited to introduce our presenter today, Scott Lumpkin. But before I do, I'd like to say just a few words about our webinar series. As an industry leader in plan giving marketing, Stelter is committed to providing innovative solutions and education for our industry. We are happy to host this complimentary webinar today, as well as a whole slate of webinars throughout the year. Today's webinar is the fourth in our 2018 curriculum, and we have 5 more scheduled for 2018. Upcoming topics include a look at new research from Dr. Russell James on July 18th, email insights and trends from our own experts at Stelter in September, and tips for creating standard performance metrics for charitable gift planners with Joe Bowl later this year. Invites will be sent out as each webinar approaches, or you can visit our webinar page at stelter.com/webinars to register today. Also on our webinar page is a library of our webinar recordings that are free for all of you to enjoy. So please check that out. Now back to our presentation today, Learning to Speak Gift Planning, presented by Scott Lumpkin. Scott is the principal of Scott R. Lumpkin and Associates, where he serves as a fundraising consultant, nonprofit strategist, and philanthropic advisor. Scott consults with nonprofit organizations and individuals on transformational philanthropic strategies with a focus on planned, major, and principal gifts. He works closely with advancement leaders, boards, and staff to build a portfolio-focused, relationship-driven culture of securing gifts. Prior to launching his consulting firm in 2015, Scott had a 32-year advancement career at the University of Denver, working primarily with high net worth donors to maximize their philanthropic impact. Scott led DU's gift planning program for more than 25 years before serving 5 years as Vice Chancellor of University Advancement. It is our extreme pleasure and honor to have an industry legend like Scott to join us today to share his wisdom and expertise. We really appreciate your time. Thank you, Scott.
Thanks so much, Jeremy, and thanks, Jen. I don't know about being a legend. I just enjoy being a gift planner. But thank you very much. I've known Jeremy for a long time, and since you're here in the Denver area. And I'm just thrilled. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me today and for being part of the call. You know, as charitable gift planners, it's very important that we all know how people give, the different strategies and ways that they can give, from current and outright gifts to life income gifts and future gifts. That's a big part of our toolkit as charitable gift planners. But in my experience, as I went on year after year, I found that what was most meaningful for me and honestly most rewarding was my ability to build opportunities really to build successful, meaningful conversations. And I learned and I realized that the conversations that I was having with donors was different with the conversations that I would have with colleagues or advisors or different people. So I realized that there were different gift planning languages. Our focus today really is on just that, on how to help you become more effective in your conversations. That's my goal. You see, I realized and I came to the conclusion that in spite of the importance of knowing how people give, really, I found that it was equally important and perhaps even more important to be effective in conversations, to be able to know how to speak, to converse, to communicate well, and with people that help them move forward to maximizing their impact on a place that we both believed in. So that's our focus today. Again, thanks to all of you all for joining us. That's kind of where we're headed over the next 30, 45 minutes. We will leave time at the end for questions, as Jen and Jeremy mentioned. And again, thanks so much to Stelter Company for the opportunity to join you all today. Before we jump into the first slide and start talking about conversations, I want to ask you to do something with me. If we were all in a room together, which would really be my preference, so I'm envisioning all of you kind of across the U.S. joining us today, but I would much rather we be in a room together. I wanted to ask you to do something. If you would pull out a pen and pencil and write down the name of at least one donor write down at least one donor name that you'd like to have a deeper conversation with, specifically around gift planning. So at least one, maybe two or three. So don't want to just pause for a second. I'm counting on you all doing this since I can't see you. So take just a second, write down 1, 2, or 3 donor names. This is going to help you as we walk through our time together. Okay, everybody got it? Okay, I want you just to stop for a second and picture that person. The person that came to your mind, first of all, there's a reason. It's because you already know something about them or you've been thinking about them. You want to have a deeper conversation. So I want you to picture them. If you can imagine their voice or what it's like sitting around their kitchen table or in their office, do that. I just want you to try to zero in and imagine, get a sense of what it's like and where you are with them when you have a conversation with that person. Okay, got it? Great. So then let's think about when we're talking about having a conversation, what is that? Conversation is the informal exchange of ideas by spoken words. Ideally, that's in person, but obviously many times as gift planners, we can have meaningful conversations also by phone. But either way, it's a live, informal exchange. And when we think about gift planning, it's so easy for it to become too formal, to be focused again on the how, rather than on an informal dialogue where we're exchanging ideas and learning about this person. So again, today we're really focusing on conversations. But we face challenges as gift planners. And the challenge is, first of all, is that each of us has our own mother tongue, basically a way that is our natural way of speaking. And that's what we bring to our practice as gift planners. But as I mentioned earlier, there's not just one audience. We have donors, we have colleagues, we have advisors, and each of those also has a different language that they speak. That's important for us to realize because we have to understand that the language that you and I speak naturally is not necessarily, and it probably isn't the same language that our other gift planning audiences speak. So that presents the challenge of becoming multilingual. So if we're setting out today on a quest to learn to speak gift planning, that is a worthy challenge, but we have to understand that it's actually a challenge that involves multiple languages. So let's look at the audiences. Here's what I believe, in my experience, are the 6 different audiences that we experience as gift planners. First of all, obviously, donors and prospects. Second, professional advisors. And obviously, that's everybody from a donor's accountant to their attorney. It could be an insurance professional, a bank or trust officer. In some cases, it's a financial planner. It's someone who is in an advisory capacity, the trusted capacity. Colleagues. Most of you, I've looked through the list of attendees today, and you all come from large and small organizations from all over the country. I see a number of friends that I know personally on the call today. Thanks so much for joining us. But those colleagues, think about the colleagues. Those are the people that you work with in your organization. They might be, hopefully, they're fundraising colleagues. You might be a single person fundraising shop, but many of you I know have other fundraising colleagues. Then we have members of the business office. These are your accountants, the controllers, the folks who run the finance side of your organization. And then, of course, we have supervisors, the folks that we report directly to. And then lastly, institutional leaders. And I'm thinking here specifically about the president, executive director. It might be a VP of advancement, but it also includes board members and maybe high-level volunteers. Those are the different audiences that we have. Now, those translate into different languages. So each of those has a different language that they speak, or a dialect, if you will. They're all speaking English, hopefully, but the dialect, the words that they use and the values that they're coming from all differ. Here's what I mean. When we're talking about donors, of course, we're talking about philanthropy. And philanthropy is a big word. And that's why, for me, I like to tell people What I do is to build relationships with people and help them maximize their impact on a place that we both believe in. That's what I do as a gift planner. So that's donors. Advisors, they think in the terms of the language of representation. They're all about representing their clients. And then colleagues. Colleagues are about partnering. They're focused on being your partner in raising more funds for your organizations. Business office, accountability. Accountability to all sorts of audiences, internal and external. Your bosses, your supervisors, they're focused on productivity, maximizing our collective impact as fundraisers. And then lastly, institutional leaders, your board members, president, they're all focused on impact. So these are the different languages that correspond to the audiences that we have. We're going to focus most of our time today on the language of philanthropy, and then we'll come back around to the other languages toward the end of our time. When I think about the language of philanthropy, I think specifically about satisfied donors. And when I think about my favorite donor stories, and I think back over all of my years at the University of Denver, I immediately see faces and I hear the voices of donors that I loved working with. And honestly, that was one of the things that kept me at the University of Denver for so long. It was the relationships with satisfied donors who were excited about having made an impact. And their satisfaction all tied to the various points along the wheel here that I've identified. It starts with their stories. It ties into their values, what they care about. As I mentioned already, wanting to make an impact on a place they care about. But it also ties into family and friends, members in their circle that may also share some of their values and may not. It ties into their planning priorities financially in terms of their wealth, estate planning priorities. It certainly then factors into assets, what they own, and obviously as gift planners, that's a very important piece that we need to keep in mind and explore, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And of course, we have to be aware of limitations. Every donor has limitations, and being aware of those and understanding what their limitations are helps us then become most effective as we work with donors. So the language of philanthropy is all ultimately about having satisfied donors. So the key I find, and that I want to challenge for each of you, is to think about, how do I understand my donor better? Go back and look at that name. Go back and look at them, pull up that 1, 2, or 3 names that you wrote down. And I want you to think about that specific person. Ask yourself, do you know their story? And do you know it as deeply as you'd like? Here's some of the questions that I think are helpful for us to ask. Do I know what matters to them? Do I know their connection? Do I really understand how they got connected to this place with my organization? Who are the people in their lives? That could be everything from immediate family members to friends, certainly advisors. That's another important point of understanding who are the influential people in their lives. And then what's going on in their lives? What's happening right now? What are the events? What are the factors? What are the issues, considerations that may play into their decisions about making a difference for our organizations? What are they thinking about? What occupies their thoughts? And most importantly, what are their dreams? I love this question because when we take the time to ask somebody, what's your dream for our organization? You've been so involved, you've been such a faithful donor for so long. When you start dreaming about our organization, what do you think about? If you think about, or if you were to dream about really accomplishing something great or leaving a special legacy, what would that look like? So I want to encourage you, take the time to ask these questions. That's the foundation for building an ongoing conversation and the kind of deep relationship that will move beyond just a transaction to transformation. What do I mean by that? I find that a lot of times it's very easy to approach planned gifts in terms of a transaction. Somebody wants to make a gift of our appreciated securities. Great, here's the basics, here's how you do it. That's important that we provide that information. Or, you want to do another gift annuity? Great, here it is. But I find if we can take the time and have a deeper conversation about what they ultimately want to accomplish, then it will elevate the conversation to a whole new level. And it moves the focus to a much bigger idea. Just a reminder, remember, it's not about you. I'm sure some of you are an extrovert like me. I'm a flaming extrovert, and it's so easy for me to come into a situation and just spend too much time talking. I have to remind myself, it's not about me. It's about them, and I want to focus on learning everything I can about this wonderful person that's invited me into their home or their office or been willing to take my call. Sometimes it's worth asking ourselves, what's keeping me from understanding? What's keeping me from having a deeper understanding? I've just kind of thrown in a few different points right here just to be aware of that. And you can just kind of factor those in. For some of us, it might be we're too concerned about the technicalities. Don't worry about that. Sometimes misplaced priorities keep us focused on other things. It might be institutional misconceptions that the donor has or that we have, maybe even improper expectations that we have or our boss, or as I mentioned earlier, more of a transactional focus or relational discomfort. Ask yourself, do any of these pose roadblocks for you? It's also worth thinking just for a little bit about what matters to donors and what doesn't. And I think this is really helpful just to keep things clear. First of all, things that donors don't really care about. First of all, believe it or not, no, they really don't care about plan giving technicalities. They don't care about the tax code. They don't care about the 4-tier system of income on charitable remainder trusts. And similarly, they don't care that much about tax regulations. Yes, they care about the impact of taxes on themselves, but they don't care about the regulations themselves. Similarly, they really don't care that much about professional designations, and those are good, but that's not number one for them. Similarly, they're not concerned about institutional issues and deadlines, or believe it or not, they're not concerned about our individual goals or metrics. What do they really care about? Again, as I think back over my time with so many donors, these are the things that kept coming back to me as I thought about it. Number one, connection. Their connection with your institution. That's what they care about. Number two, trust. The most important thing that we can do as gift planners is to build a trust-based relationship right up front. And obviously that's critical, and that forms the basis for us moving forward to talk about impact. And there's no way that someone will trust us enough to have a deeper conversation unless they have that foundation. They do care about our competency, though. They want to know that we know what we're talking about, that we understand how to help them have an impact. They also care about our commitment. Unfortunately, in our world, there's a lot of turnover. There's a lot of movement across jobs and across institutions. And to the extent that you can stay with your organization, the longer you can stay, the deeper your commitment is able to go. And so even just simply knowing that you have a commitment to an organization, you really care about it, that is going to be meaningful to donors. In turn, that tells them that you care about understanding them. And when you understand them, then you start devoting time and attention to communicating with them regularly, building that relationship, and then ultimately, when the time comes, conveying gratitude to them when they've completed their gift. So just a few reminders on that point. All right. This is one of the most important slides that I want to talk about and spend a little bit of time on conversational gift planning. And I've started here, the first point on the left, consider the 5 key conversation drivers. I've listed them on the side. And I find that for me, it really helps to keep these 5 things in mind, especially as I'm having a first-time conversation with someone. 5 key conversation drivers that will help you develop a conversation and then move forward in the conversation with people. So number 1, life and people. That's easy, right, to just think about. That's where we all go. That's kind of level number 1. And then level number 2, values and priorities. it's really getting a sense of what they care about. What do they want to do? What matters to them? And thankfully, for many of us, where most of the conversations or many of the conversations that we have with people are later in their life. They're in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, or even 90s. And so they have a lifetime of values and priorities, and they're willing to share those with us if we'll ask, if we'll take the time to pull those out. Sometimes it feels like dragging them out, but hopefully it's a natural part of the conversation. Level number 3 gets to plans in the future. What are their plans? It might be financially, it might be personally, it might be family related, but just understanding what their plans are for the future. And that, of course, also ties into our organizations. What are their dreams for our future? That then takes us to level number 4, assets, understanding what they own. And that's also something that we tease out and we explore in conversation. And then lastly, it's the philanthropy side. When we've moved through all of these conversation levels, then it brings us naturally to a point of philanthropy. But this leads me to the second point, on the second bullet point on the left there. And this is one of the most revolutionary concepts that I learned a long time ago and that I want to share with you. And it was one of the most important disciplines that has helped me so much in my practice as a gift planner. Before I get out of the car and walk up to ring the person's doorbell, or before I pick up the phone and dial their number, I try to ask myself, what information do I want to learn? And then set a goal for that visit. Specifically, I want to ask myself, what do I want this person to say yes to on this visit or in this interaction? Now, saying yes might be as simple as agreeing to see me again, or saying yes might be being willing to share with me about their values and priorities or the plans for the future. But bottom line, before I walk in the door, I try to think about that and to think in terms of those series of yeses. And in my experience, when we think in terms of a series of yeses, when the donor says, yeah, I'm willing to see you again, or yes, I'm willing to share with you my thoughts, or yes, I'd like to receive some information about that. That forms the basis for a natural relationship that moves forward productively, and it doesn't just sit in kind of a vortex of friendly conversation that never goes there, never goes anywhere. And that, of course, is the third bullet. Active listening helps us keep the conversation going and moving forward, not just focused on what's happening with the weather or the latest sports scores or whatever may be happening. Final point, remember with any of our conversations, remember to end with next steps. Donors appreciate knowing what's happening next. Where are we going next? So with every conversation, make sure that you end with what happens next. Okay. Having said all of that, in my experience, I get asked probably more often than any other question. The most question that I get asked most often is, how do I introduce gift planning? Just practically, how do I introduce it in the conversation? I've had so many people ask me, Scott, I'm great at building rapport with someone. I'm great at finding out about them. I'm great at finding out their connection with my organization and thanking them. That's all very comfortable, but I'm just not that comfortable in how do I actually introduce the concept of gift planning into the conversation? Well, this is what we're going to focus on, and this is one of the most important pieces of our time today. So I believe I've found for me that there are 5 natural ways to introduce gift planning into the conversation. The first one is to ask permission. And for each of these, I'm going to show you sample language of actual wording that I have used and still use today as I work with people on introduce gift planning. So the first one, ask permission to have a conversation about giving through their estate plans. Number 2, ask about a past request. Perhaps they've requested information in the past or indicated that they've already made a planned gift. Number 3, offer to provide plan giving information. That's pretty easy. Number 4, use an example of someone else who's made a planned gift. And number 5, offer creative ideas that might be of specific value to them. Okay, let's look at some examples. Ask permission. So I'm going to read through this, not because I know all of you all can read it, but I want you to hear the tone that I use with these. And the important point is just to think about this language, and my goal in providing a series of slides with actual language is for you to be able to put it in your own voice. So I want to encourage you to look at these, change it, edit it, but practice it. Learn to be able to say it in your own voice, and it will become natural and comfortable. And before long, you'll find yourself being more comfortable than ever having deeper and more effective gift planning conversations. So in this case, I frequently will build on the fact that most of the time, the people that I'm talking with have already been giving. In fact, research has shown that there is a direct correlation between the loyalty that someone has in terms of frequency of giving and the likelihood that they would make a planned gift. So I'll frequently say, you know, Ms. Smith, you've been such a consistent donor. We are so grateful. I'd like to ask you if I could have a conversation with you about another way that you could support our organization. You know, many loyal supporters and volunteers for us have also included us in their estate plans. I'd be so grateful if it's something you would be comfortable considering to talk with you about that sometime, you know, whenever and if ever you wish. The important thing is then just to pause. Don't fill in the gap. Resist the temptation to jump in too quickly. Just pause. They'll respond. And in many cases, I find that they'll come back and say, you know, Scott, I've thought about that, and it's not something that I've done, but I'd like to do something. Can you help me do that? Can you give me some information about it? In most cases, I've found that that's the majority of time that people will respond that way. Sometimes they will say, you know, I've actually already done that. I realize I just hadn't told you all. In a small portion of times, people will come back and say, you know, I'm just not interested in that. Okay, that's fine. You know, that's just fine. But I find if you're talking to loyal donors, most of the time they're going to be very receptive. So again, this is ask permission. The second approach is to ask about a past request. Thanks for requesting information about including Old Ivy in your estate plans. I'm happy to help. I'm curious, though, what prompted you to request that information? What prompted you to request that information? Or another one, some time ago, you indicated that you had included us in your estate plans. Thank you so much. Can I ask what prompted you to include us in your plans? Did you have something specific in mind for what you want to accomplish? So what am I trying to do here? I'm trying to get them talking. Number one, I'm thanking them for what they've done, but I'm trying to explore their interests, their passions. I'm trying to get them to open up and tell me more about what prompted that. Because in every case, there's almost always a story behind it. By the way, you'll notice in these examples, in sample conversation wording, I'm trying to make it easy for them to say yes. Now, it's not necessarily saying yes to, oh, of course I'll do that. It's like a previous example on asking permission. All I wanted to do was to say, would you be willing to have a conversation? So a key principle in all of our gift planning conversations is to make it easy for them to say yes. So keep that in mind. The third strategy, third way to introduce gift planning is to offer to provide planned giving information. Here's again some easy ways that I've used so many times. There's several ways of including Old Ivy in your future plans. Could I leave you a brochure that talks about some of those? Or some assets have special benefits if you leave them to Old Ivy. Would you like to know more about some of those? Or the third one, which is especially important now with the permanent approval of the passage of the IRA rollover provisions, did you know that traditional IRAs and retirement plans are taxed if you leave them to family and friends, but not if you leave them to our organization? Can I tell you more? So again, the key is trying to make it conversational. Put it in your own language. Now, here's my favorite, number 4. This is my go-to strategy for introducing gift planning. And it's using that example. You remind me of a lot of alumni. Boy, there's a typo there. I apologize. I missed up on that one. You remind me a lot of alumni I've worked with, alumni who I've worked with who are not only supported Old Ivy year after year, they also created a permanent legacy by including Old Ivy in their estate plans. If that's something you'd ever consider, I'd be glad to talk with you about it. We can even provide sample bequest language that makes it very easy. So the point is, I'm emphasizing, you remind me, I'm telling them, you remind me of many folks that I've worked with who have done good things. And so what am I doing? I'm sincerely telling them, this is a good thing. You remind me of somebody who's done something good. I'm making a connection with them, with somebody who has had an impact on our organizations. And again, this approach, using an example of someone else, I find is always well received. And I've never had somebody respond honestly negatively to this approach. Most of the time, people respond by saying, yeah, that's something I'd be willing to consider, or actually, I've already done that. Here's another one. We've had a number of wonderful commitments this year. John Smith just made a commitment to endow a fund in his parents' names. He did this with a simple provision in his will. Again, you can finish the sentence. Is that something you would ever consider? Or, did you know John Smith? He was, one of your classmates. Or you could say, we just received a wonderful gift from Mary Adams. She passed away recently, but left a provision in her estate plans for her favorite program and department. That was really, really amazing what she's done. Again, you can pause, let them respond, let them react. They'll do that. Give them time to think about it, to process what you've said, because in many cases, it might be something that they've thought about, but they just haven't done much with. They've probably received your plan giving mailings. Of course, in this case, if you all are Stelter clients, they would have received information along the way there. But maybe they just hadn't processed it or decided to take the next step. So you're helping them do that. Here's one more example of using someone else. There's many ways you can make a gift. You can still keep the income and get a deduction. I was working with someone recently who bought stock 15 years ago for $5,000, and now it's gone up to $50,000. He wanted more income, but didn't want to lose money to capital gain taxes from selling the stock. So we helped him set up a life income gift that allowed him to make a gift but keep the income for life without paying capital gain taxes. Now, obviously, I'm thinking of a charitable gift annuity. Very simple. That would be a perfect gift for that size gift. But I don't immediately talk about it that way. I emphasize the basics of how he could make the gift and the benefits to him. If he wants to know more, then I can tell him about that. The last strategy is to offer creative ideas. And creative ideas specifically that build on what you've already learned and help solve a problem that you've already heard from the donor. So you mentioned that you were concerned about retirement income. Can I give you some information how you could make a gift and increase your retirement income at the same time? Or, I understand you might not be able to fund an endowed scholarship now. Some donors fund scholarship awards with annual gifts during their lifetimes and then endow a scholarship from their estates. Is that something that would fit for you? Obviously, that's the stereotypical example of a blended gift, that last example. So we're opening the door to a deeper conversation about how someone can blend two different kinds of gifts. So those are all of the different ways to introduce gift planning into conversations. Again, I encourage you, work with one of those. Pick one. Try it the next time. Maybe think about the donors that you wrote down the name or names at the beginning of our time together, and try one of those phrases with them. The point is, find one that's comfortable for you and that you can get used to and make a natural part of your conversation skills so that it's easy and natural for you to use in the conversations. Okay, a couple kind of points. Plan giving donor Taekwondo. I'm not a martial arts person, but I understand what kind of one of the big principles of Taekwondo is working with and kind of the energy, of the person on the other side. And that really starts with my point here of immerse yourself in the prospect's life. Sort of the old Kung Fu show years ago with David Carradine. His phrase from his mentor would say, be one with the prospect, grasshopper. And so that's just a reminder, we need to be one with the people that we're talking with. It's about them. And so we need to take the time to put ourselves in their shoes. Find out, again, what do they care about and what do they care about with our organization? As part of that, it's just a good reminder to almost never, directly oppose a prospect's comments. Listen to them, but don't disagree. Find a way to listen to, acknowledge what they're saying, They may have some very strong feelings about things that have happened in the past with your organization or things going on in the world. Our job is to listen and then to be able to help redirect and pull the conversation toward ultimately a meaningful impact. A couple pointers. Number one is that someone's response to a marketing piece or a referral from a staff may not indicate the best path. So just because somebody checks a box responding to, say, a mailing about gift annuities or charitable remainder trusts, that doesn't mean that that's absolutely the best path and that's the best option. They may just be saying, this is kind of interesting, I'd like to learn more. And that's why the final bullet. We have to listen for the prospect's direction and then encourage that. We have to listen deeply enough to what they care about and what's going in their lives and what fits with their unique situation to be able to help them and guide them toward the most effective gift option. Again, remember at the very beginning of our conversation, I talked about the difference between transaction versus transformation. And in my mind, all of these steps, we're trying to focus more on transformation. It can take a little bit longer, but if we take the time to have deeper conversations and build around deeper relationships, the result is much more likely to be a transformational gift rather than just a transactional gift. Okay, let's go back then to our gift planning audiences. We focused most of our time on donors and prospects, but I want to jump for a while to the other audiences that we work with. So remember, we've got these 6 audiences, and then the 6 languages or dialects that each of those represent, that guide and reflect how they see the world. So let's take a look at each one of those. So the first one is advisors, and that's the language of representation. So for each of these audiences, I've given you a slide that emphasizes their values, their priorities, and their concerns. So think about advisors. Think about that person. So again, look at that name that you've got in front of you or names. Think about, do you know who their accountant or their attorney is? Well, what do they care about? More than anything else is their responsibility in representing their client. Tied to that is they take a vow of confidentiality. That's one of the highest standards for professional advisors. So those two pieces, that guides everything that they do. Those are core values. Obviously, the other ones, professionalism, integrity as well, but especially the top 2. So their priorities, number 1, are about their client goals and interests. Yeah, they have compliance, documentation, et cetera, billable hours that they have to obviously generate. What are their concerns? These are the questions they're asking themselves. When you're calling them on the phone or you're talking to them about their client making a gift, they're asking themselves, is this really in my client's best interest? And then they're asking, how will you work with my client? Can I trust you? In some cases, then as you go farther along, they may be asking themselves, can you help me find new clients? So when we work with advisors, it's really important that we take the time to show them respect, help them help their client. So in other words, make it easy. We can do that by providing sample bequest language that's already ready to go. We can help them by being a resource. Maybe it's providing information about our organization, or in some cases, it's about the IRA rollover and how that works. It depends on the advisor, and you can ask them, would you like to receive information about this particular way of giving? The bottom line, remember that advisors are all about the language of representation. Next, we come to colleagues, our fundraising colleagues. And again, whether if you're in a large shop and you have multiple fundraising colleagues or just have 1 or 2, they're all about partnership. And that means they're thinking, is this gift planning person, are they going to collaborate with me or compete with me? Are they really want to work with me as a team or just individually? Who's going to get credit? Credit's important. And so that then leads us to the priorities. For our major gift colleagues, our fundraising colleagues, they care about closing the gift. That's what matters to them. And they also want to be valued, recognized, and rewarded. Their concerns, the questions that they're asking themselves are, okay, you're talking to me about this planned gift, and you want to talk with my prospect or get me to go with you and talk with my prospect about a planned gift. Who's going to get credit? That's important. We all have metrics. And as Jeremy mentioned earlier, one of the webinars later in the year is about performance metrics. So metrics are important, credit's important. We're fundraisers, that matters. But they're also asking, how will we work together? Are you going to take my prospect or come alongside me? And bottom line, can I trust you? So with colleagues present an opportunity for us to leverage our efforts. I think we could do so much more in helping our colleagues incorporate gift planning into their conversations. And when we do that, we can leverage the impact for such greater impact than if you and I are the only ones talking about gift planning in our organizations. How do we do that? Simple step, I want you to write down, go with them. One of the simplest, easiest steps you can do is just to go with a colleague. Go with a colleague, with someone who might be a prospect for plan giving, and let them see how you would work the conversation, obviously with them. So go along with them on a call. I think you'll find it makes a big difference. Next, we have the language of accountability, your business office. And obviously, every one of us have business office that we have to work with. Those are the financial folks, the treasurers, controllers, and they are all about controls, policies, accuracy, managing risk. Their priorities are being able to reconcile numbers and reports, so they have to understand that. Their concerns are about auditors, the people who come in every year. They're concerned about board of trustees. They do care about present value versus future value, meaning they draw a big distinction between gifts that impact our organizations today versus gifts that are down the road. Now, one of the biggest issues with our business offices are the questions of counting versus accounting. And this would be a whole other webinar, but my point here is that counting gifts, counting and recognizing meaningful gift activity is different than accounting. But many times controllers and your treasurers and financial officers, they treat them as if they're the same thing. So this points up the need for very clear counting policies for gifts that distinguishes between different types of gifts, and it helps the business office understand that that current gift of appreciated securities is different from the bequest commitment that's going to come to fruition down the road. Both can be counted for fundraising reporting purposes, but both probably aren't going to be accounted for in the same way. So there's your business office. Really important to build strong relationships with them. Next, our bosses, supervisors. What do they care about? They care about our productivity. That's what they want to know about. So they care about maximizing fundraising results. So with our supervisors, I find that one of the most important things we can do is to, number one, take your boss with you. Take them with you on a gift planning conversation. And I guarantee you, they probably will come away impressed with your ability to have deeper conversations. And they may even say, hey, could you teach me how to do that? I'd like to be able to have those conversations with our board members. And then lastly are those institutional leaders. This is your president. Maybe it is a VP of advancement, but it's certainly our board members. They care about the big picture. That's their language. And so they think in those terms. They do care about balancing short-term needs with long-term goals, but they know they need to be focused on the long term. So what can we do for them? We can make them successful. Gift planning holds the keys to moving our organizations forward like no other kind of gift, and has greater power to do that. So the more we can help institutional leaders see the power of gift planning, especially in driving the big ideas, the really transformational ideas, that then helps those institutional leaders become champions, become gift planning champions, and they can really help us move forward in so many ways, and frankly, even start having conversations about gift planning with their peers. Okay, so when you think about this, we've got all of these different gift planning languages, gift planning dialects. It doesn't have to be overwhelming, and I certainly don't want it to be, but just here's a couple kind of wrapping up points for you. Number one, think about your default dialect. Part of this just depends on your own personality. Part of it depends on your background. If you've come out of more of an accounting or legal background, that's going to affect your approach. If you come out of more of a relationship or a communication focus, that's going to affect your style. My point is just think about, be aware of what your default communication style is, and then take the time to assess your strengths and weaknesses. Think about how you can improve, how you can become a better, more strategic communicator when it comes to gift planning. In some cases, I even find it helpful to find a coach and a partner. Most of the time, this is informal. You know, you might find some other colleagues just there in your organization, or maybe colleagues there in your city or community. And you can have it be an informal gift planning group where you spend time talking about everything from ways to give to how to have more effective conversations. As you do, you'll be able to see your progress moving along, and then you can seek and apply feedback. And this is really where it comes back around to colleagues and supervisors. But you can let them know, this is something that I want to become more effective. I want to focus on deepening my conversational skills. Well, as we wrap things up, having spent all of the time that I did in higher education, I couldn't resist by leaving you a little bit of homework. So here's my homework for you. Here's a challenge. I want to encourage you to identify 3 people from different gift planning audiences and make a plan for communicating more effectively with them by using their unique language. Now, maybe one of them is the name that you wrote down or names, but I'd encourage you to pick at least 1 or 2 from different audiences as well that you're working with. It could be your supervisor. It could be a colleague. Maybe it's an advisor. But the point is just to write down a specific name from one of those groups and to start thinking about how you can be communicating with them more effectively. I'll give you a second just to pause there. Again, think about 1 or 2 people from some of the other gift planning audiences that comes to your mind. And so hopefully within the next couple of weeks, at the very least over the next month or 2, I know things can slow down sometimes in the summer, but don't let it go too long while this is fresh in your mind. Look for an opportunity to communicate with them in a different, more effective way. With that, let me open it up to questions. I know, Jen, I know we might have some questions there, so let me turn it over to you. And happy to help anywhere I can.
Sure. Thank you, Scott. We'll give you just a minute to maybe take a breath and a drink of water, and we'll look through some questions. We did have a couple that came in, and I would encourage you, if you're on the line and have a question, go ahead and send it in, and hopefully Scott will be able to get to it. So Liz has a question. It's kind of specific, but yet I feel like this is something more organizations are facing. So I'm going to go ahead and ask it. She says that their organization is moving ahead with what is going to be their 3rd merger in just the last 10 years. And she's wondering if you have any ideas about mitigating donor concerns about what the future is going to look like for their organization when you're speaking to them about making a long-term plan for their philanthropy.
Wow, that's a great question, and you're right, tricky, because it speaks actually, in this case, unusual situation, but it also speaks to institutional change. And what I find, I'll have donors say, you know, it's not the same place anymore. You know, Scott, it's not the same university, or the leadership has changed. There's been a change here. My advice is what I find is generally helpful is to come back to say, okay, let's think about what's most meaningful to you about our organization. And so I'm trying to get down to what values do they really care about. And in most cases, even if there's been a merger or even if there's been institutional changes, in most cases, our organization still is focused on those core values. So I try to bring them back around to what they care most about and then help them see that those values are still a core part of our values and are worth them investing in.
Okay, we have a couple people, kind of a general question for you, Scott, wondering about just some resources that might be helpful for a new gift planner to learn about different plan giving vehicles and plan giving communication, books or seminars.
Sure. I think one of the best ways is to try to find if there's a local plan giving roundtable in your area. I know there's a number across the country, and if there's any way that you can tap into a gift planning roundtable, that's one of the best places to start. Usually it's a fairly cost-effective way to learn about different ways of giving in a setting where you're with other people. That also ties to that because, frankly, I've found that one of the best ways to learn and develop conversational skills is just by getting to know other gift planners. It gives you a chance just to say, how have you approached this situation? Or this is the kind of donor that I'm working with. Help me understand that, how to work more effectively with them. So that's where I would encourage you to try. Look for a local roundtable, number one. But if there isn't one, see if you can maybe find some other gift planners in your area just that you can start meeting with or connecting with informally. It's frankly easy today to find out detailed information about how people give. You only have to go to the web, and there's tons of websites. Every organization has gift planning websites, and many Stelter clients have websites that are Stelter-driven websites. So I think today the problem is not figuring out how people make gifts or learning about how people give. It's really more on the side of learning those conversational skills. So I would encourage you also to look for other seminars like this, webinars. Occasionally, CASE does a seminar. CASE does a seminar that I help coach here every year. That's about gift planning essentials. The National Organization of Charitable Gift Planners, they also do a big national conference. Other organizations. So you can look at those, just pay attention and specifically look for offerings that are focused on conversations, conversational skills, and how to move the conversation forward. To me, that really is the key, is thinking in terms of how do I move this relationship forward from where this person is today to the place where they're willing to say yes to that significant gift.
Okay, Sophie has a two-part question. She's wondering ideas and steps that you would recommend taking with a prospective plan giving donor for a nonprofit that's just started to emphasize plan giving. So they're just starting out. What steps should they take with their prospects?
Sure. Oh, I love it. That's great. And great job, Sophie, on thinking about this. And it's wonderful that you all are starting to do it. I would approach it something like this. Now, I would say, we're so thankful for your time today. Thanks for letting us visit with you. As you've been so involved with the organization for a number of years, things are going really well. We realize, though, that we need to start more planning for the future. We need to build out our sustainability for the long term. One way to do that is to start talking with donors and making them aware that they can support our organization, not just today, but also into the future. And there's a lot of ways to do that. Can I tell you about some of those? So that's the approach that I would take. I think it's so exciting and very timely just to be able to make that jump. And if you have a donor that has been consistently supporting your organization, they will respond positively to knowing that you all are now thinking about the future, you're thinking long term, and in most cases, they'll be happy to engage in that conversation with you.
Great. And the second part of Sophie's question was, do you have any thoughts about legacy societies?
Wow, that's a very open-ended question. I'll take that to say, number one, they're very important. I love legacy societies because they provide a natural way to say thank you. They also provide a natural way to create an identity for folks that they can be part of that group. And so I would encourage you to do that. Personally, I like the idea of finding a name that fits with your organization. So it's fine to call it a legacy society, but if you have a natural name that is meaningful for your organization, great. It doesn't have to be, the organization doesn't have to be fancy. Legacy societies, you don't have to spend lots of work, but they're a wonderful, very important way of creating a mechanism and vehicle to have an ongoing relationship. And I guess that's something that I should just stop and say. In all of this, we're talking about a lifetime of relationships. Our conversations with gift planning donors, those lead hopefully to a relationship that will continue for the rest of their lifetimes. So it's so important that we build that in to our work as gift planners. Having a legacy society is a natural way to do that. So it's a good vehicle for staying in touch with those folks and reminding us to maintain those relationships. Great question, Sophie.
Okay, Christy would like to know some ideas on effective conversations around assets with your donors.
Oh, great question. That's another one that I get all the time is, wow, how do I find out about assets? Well, some of the times, frequently, donors will give us clues just in the early part of our conversation when we're getting to know them. For instance, and this is where learning for the cues in the conversation and the clues that people give us. So, for instance, if they talk about where they like to go on vacations, and if they say, oh, we really especially love to go to Florida and we go there all of the time, and then it gives you an opportunity, tell me more about that. And you may be able to find out that they have a vacation home in Florida. They may also give you clues in if they make comments about the stock market. And so you can ask follow-up questions. Wow, so it sounds like you really follow the stock market, or I'm assuming that you stay pretty close touch with your investments. Do you have an advisor that you work with? So frequently people will give us clues about the assets that they own. Now, when we get into a deeper conversation, if someone really wants to know about, for instance, say a charitable gift annuity, then we can talk through them. We can talk about the benefits of giving cash or the benefits of giving appreciated securities. And so you can show that example or talk with them about the benefits of giving appreciated securities and then let them respond. They'll say, oh, well, yeah, I've got securities that I can do. So the point is, listen for clues that the donors will give you about assets, and then use gift planning vehicles as a way to describe examples of using gift planning assets, and then that will make it easy for them to tell you more and to respond.
Okay, we're almost out of time. We'll just take this one last question. And I think
Sure.
Jeremy's still with us. Jeremy, if you're here, you might want to chime in on this as well. Patrick says, we are celebrating our 50th anniversary this year. I would like to organize a team of volunteers to solicit 50 new planned gifts. Can a committee like this be effective?
Yes, absolutely. We did when I was serving as Vice Chancellor for Advancement at the University of Denver, we were in a campaign that led up to the university's 150th anniversary, and we used that specifically tied to a challenge that we built around legacy gifts in part, and tied it to the university's 150th anniversary. And so whether you use a team of volunteers or whether you use a team of fundraisers or both, absolutely. I think institutional milestones present a great opportunity to tie, especially around legacy gifts, because it's focused on the future. So great opportunity. I hope you will take advantage of it, because it's a super opportunity to engage folks in conversations.
Absolutely, and maybe Jeremy's not on still, but I know it's something that Stelter recommends all the time, and we've seen a lot of our nonprofit clients have great success with celebrating the anniversary or birthday, or like you said, just a milestone that's important to the organization, and getting people excited about that and nostalgic about it, and also looking to the future. So it's a great way, a committee and tying it to your marketing efforts throughout the year is a good idea. So
absolutely, Jen. This is Jeremy. We've had a lot of success with that, so it's worked really well.
Great. Thanks, Jeremy. We are out of time. It's a little after 1, and there was a flurry of questions that came in just at the very end. I'm afraid we're not going to get to them today, but I did want to let you know that if you have a burning question that you just really want Scott's advice on, he has offered his email address. You'll see it on the screen there. You can reach out to him, ask him your question, and he will get back to you. If you have questions on any Stelter products or services, you can reach out to myself. You can visit our website at stelter.com. Scott, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
My pleasure, Jen. Thank you.
It was,
my pleasure.
I'm sure we had over 500 people on the call today, spent the last hour with us. We really hope that you found the content useful, will help you be more successful in your donor conversations going forward. One of the questions I got throughout the webinar was, can we get the slides and can we see the recording? And the answer is yes. Those will be available, barring any technical difficulties. I will have those on our website at stelter.com/webinars by Monday, so be sure to check that out. You will get an email from me letting you know when they're there, but they should be there Monday. So again, thank you, Scott. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Scott. Really appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks so much, and thanks to everybody for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.